Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a massive mythological mystery that literally kicks off one of the greatest stories ever told. We're going to trace the origins of a monumental epic back to a surprisingly relatable, honestly kind of mundane crime, a stolen cow. But as you probably guessed, this isn't just any cow, and the consequences aren't just a slap on the wrist. No way. We're looking at a full-blown celestial heist that results in a devastating multi-generational curse. We'll see exactly how a single moment of weakness from a divine being triggered a massive domino effect that ultimately shaped the legendary history we all know as the Mahabharata. Okay, let's dive into this. Picture the desperate plea of King Shantanu. Imagine being this incredibly powerful king, absolutely heartbroken, begging your celestial wife Ganga for just a sliver of an explanation. He's asking her, what was the fault of the Vasus? What has this innocent child done that he's condemned to live among mortal men? Shantanu is completely in the dark here. He's just watched his wife systematically dispose of their previous children, right? And now he's pleading to understand why their only surviving son carries this heavy, inexplicable burden. To answer Shantanu's question, we've got to rewind the clock and look at the actual source of this trauma. So to understand the crime, we first really need to understand the scene. Imagine the breast of Mount Meru. It is the absolute idyllic, perfect sanctuary of Muni Apava, who, by the way, was formerly known as Vasishtha, the son of Varuna. The texts describe this place as a sacred asylum just brimming with birds and beasts where flowers are blooming in literally every single season. It's this place of ultimate ascetic peace where this great sage practiced his penances surrounded by sweet roots and water. You really want to keep this image of pure, undisturbed tranquility in your mind because it creates a stunningly high contrast to the dramatic and frankly selfish disruption that's about to hit it. Right, now let's introduce the target of our celestial heist. This is Nandini, and trust me, she isn't your average farm animal. Born of Kasyapa and Surabhi, who is the daughter of Daksha, she is the legendary cow of plenty. She literally possesses the power to grant every single desire. The texts lovingly describe her as having these large eyes, full udders, a fine tail, and beautiful hoofs. The virtuous sage Apava obtained Nandini's specifically for his sacred Homa rites, and because of the absolute sanctity of the hermitage, Nandini just roamed completely fearlessly through those delightful woods. She was a divine creature living her best life in a divine space, totally unbothered. Well, until some uninvited guests showed up. Enter the Vasus, led by Prithu. They're a group of celestial deities, and they're just wandering through these sacred woods with their wives enjoying the scenery, as you do. But then, the wife of a Vasu named Dhru spots Nandini. Dhru wants to impress his slender-waisted wife, so he starts bragging about the cow's qualities. And here is the kicker, the detail that changes everything. Dhru reveals that any mortal who drinks Nandini's sweet milk will remain an unchanged youth for 10,000 years. Yes, 10,000 years. That is the ultimate temptation. And once that massive number is out there, you can just see the gears in his wife's head start turning. And this brilliantly illustrates the incredibly relatable, albeit completely foolish, sequence of events that follows. Step 1. Dhru's wife sees the cow. Step 2. She realizes her mortal friend, Jidavati, the daughter of Usinara, could use that 10,000 years of youth to live free from disease and decrepitude. So she begs her husband to get the cow for her friend. And step 3, Dhru caves. Moved entirely by the desire to humor his wife, he goes and steals the cow with the help of his brothers. I mean, it's astonishing. A powerful celestial being commits a major felony simply to please his spouse, completely forgetting the immense power and high ascetic merit of the rishi who actually owns her. He didn't even pause to think about the sin he was committing. But of course, you absolutely cannot steal from a powerful ascetic and just get away with it. When the sun sets, Rishi Apava returns to his peaceful asylum with the fruits he's collected for the evening. He immediately notices that Nandini and her calf are nowhere to be found. He searches the woods, but when he can't find her physically, he taps into his real power. He uses his ascetic vision, and instantly, boom, he sees exactly what happened. He uncovers the whole celestial heist. The profound peace of Mount Meru is shattered in a second, replaced by the blazing, kindled wrath of a deeply wronged sage. This brings us to the pivotal moment of the whole story. Apava declares a fateful sentence. He says, "Because the Vasus have stolen my cow of sweet milk and handsome tail, therefore shall they certainly be born on earth." Now let that sink in for a second. For celestial beings, immortality and a heavenly existence are just their default state. To be forced into human birth, to suffer the pains, the limitations, and the eventual death of a mortal, that is literally the ultimate punishment. Apava establishes this direct, inescapable cause and effect. You disrupted my sacred life for a selfish desire, so you are going to lose your heavenly status entirely. Now the Vasus realize their terrible mistake and rush back to try and pacify the rishi. But Apava is a man of his word. A curse uttered in wrath like that cannot simply be erased. He does, however, modify the verdict based on who was actually culpable. The other Vasus, like Dava, who really just assisted, get a lighter sentence. They're going to be freed from the curse within a year of being born as humans. But Jew? Well, Jew was the ringleader. For his specific sinful act of stealing the cow, he gets a specialized, agonizingly long-term punishment. He will live a very, very long life on Earth. Sure, he'll be virtuous, highly educated in scriptures, and an obedient son, but, and this is a massive but, he will never have children, and he must completely abstain from female companionship. Forever. So the crucial point is how this divine sentence is actually carried out on Earth, and honestly, it is incredibly grim. The Vasus go to the goddess Ganga and beg her for a favor. They say, when they are born to her as mortal children, she must immediately throw them into the water. Now this sounds horrific to a mortal like King Santanu, but this was actually Ganga's dark mercy. By drowning the infants, she was instantly freeing the other Vasus from their earthly curse, just exactly as the rishi promised. But when it came to the final child, Dew, she had to stop. She had to leave him alive so he could endure his long, lonely sentence on Earth. And that perfectly explains the agonizing mysteries Santanu was facing earlier. Which brings us to the mind-blowing scale of this domino effect. That surviving child, the reincarnated Diyu, is named Ganga and later Devavrata. He grows up to excel his father in literally all accomplishments. And if you know the lore, you might know him by his later, most famous name, Bhishma. His enforced vow of celibacy, which was mandated by this very curse, creates a massive succession crisis down the line. This singular, flawed heist in the celestial woods essentially gives birth to a legend and sets the very foundation for the splendid history called the Mahabharata. It's crazy to think about, but without this stolen cow, the epic we all know simply doesn't happen. I'll leave you with this final thought today. Knowing what we know now, that the grand, tragic, monumental story of the Mahabharata was fundamentally triggered by a guy who made a foolish mistake just to impress his wife, how does that change your view of the epic? For me, it strips away that unapproachable divine perfection and roots these grand legends in incredibly relatable human weakness. It shows us that even the most massive, world-altering histories can start with the absolute smallest of missteps. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning the origins of the stories you thought you knew. Catch you next time.